Immigration, illegal and otherwise, been a hot topic this campaign season, but perhaps there has never been a more contested and more influential deportation case in United States history than the one the government pursued against musical icon John Lennon. The year was 1972. The Vietnam War raged on, a cultural youth revolution was underway, and in the Oval Office, a paranoid President Nixon and his staff were worried that the former Beatle and his wife, Yoko Ono, would unite America's youth to revolt against the status quo. Lennon had been living in New York for a year when he and Yoko Ono found out they were going to be deported. John and Yoko turned to Leon Wildes for help. Wildes had no idea who Lennon was in the beginning, but took on the case. A 5-year battle for John Lennon to be granted citizenship started, but the importance of the case still reverberates in the halls of Washington to this day and directly to the Obama White House. Leon Wildes recounts this monumental case in his new book, John Lennon versus the USA. And he and his son, immigration attorney Michael Wildes, join us now here. Gentlemen, nice to have you back here with us. It's good to talk with you. Leon, I want to start with you because I thought this was fascinating when I was reading this. When you were first approached about handling this case, did you know who John Lennon was?
Not at all. And certainly I didn't know who Yoko Ono was. I was told by the attorney for their manager who called me and invited me to go along with them to visit John and Yoko in their apartment down in Greenwich Village, that they are real icons. And I asked exactly what did they do. Well, I was told what they did, but that didn't seem to sink in with me. In fact, when I got home that night, my wife asked me, who are the heavyweights you were with so that you couldn't come home for dinner? I said, Jack Lemmon and Yoko Moto. And she said to me, are you talking about John Lennon and Yoko Ono? I said, yeah, that sounds more like it.
And I just thought that was a fascinating start to what became a long and complicated case here. Mike, let me ask you to jump in on some of this conversation. Essentially, why was it that the United States of America wanted John Lennon to leave the country?
The government at the time, led by Richard Nixon, conspired to politically eviscerate Lennon's influence on 18 to 21-year-olds who were first given the right to vote in that election. He was paranoid to believe that Lennon would influence it because of his anti-war sentiment. And they found an old drug charge. It would happen to be planted narcotics put into a binocular by a corrupt cop who had done it to Mick Jagger. And they tried to use that to get the famous Beatle deported.
Now, Leon, let me come back to you. Now, you had the reputation as being, if not the top guy, one of the top guys in the business, talking about immigration law back then in the early 70s. Had you ever seen a case such as this?
I never saw such an approach by the government where there is no room. I was told, Leon, since it's you, we'll give you 1 month, but your clients will never get another extension and get them the hell out.
So 5 years worth of litigation. How ultimately did it resolve itself?
Eventually, the Court of Appeals in this area ruled that the immigration judge was wrong and that the conviction should not be held against John, and remanded the case to the Board of Immigration Appeals to rehear the case and send it to the immigration judge to conduct a hearing to determine whether, as a discretionary matter, he should get residence.
Last question for you, Michael, because it's a fascinating story back then, but it still has implications today, yes?
The net effect of this case was the foundation, the jurisprudence, if you would, upon which President Obama relied. And now about 700,000 young people are dreamers. He's saying in Imagine.
This notion of discretion.
Yeah, this whole sense, this was a dreamer. He was a prophet in many ways, John. But now there's the DACA program, where 16 to 31-year-old people that were brought here by the grace of their own parents and know no other flag and will fight for no other army can remain here. And it was a famous Beatle and an iconic lawyer that made that happen.
So all that flowing from what you thought at the time was Jack Lemmon and Yoko Ono became this book, John Lennon versus the USA, the inside story of the most bitterly contested and influential deportation case in United States history. It reads like a novel. It's a pleasure. Leon, Michael, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the book.
It was a pleasure to be here.